Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a shortcut, really, bypassing maybe centuries of complex ritual to look at a system of practical magic that's known for being incredibly efficient, fast even.
Yeah, we're talking about sigils.
Exactly. Sigils, these like concentrated symbols of what you want.
Mm.
And we're focusing on the ideas pushed by Osman Spare, an occultist from the early 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
What's really striking is that often you just need, well, a pen and paper, and maybe counterintuitively, the ability to forget.
And it's fascinating because this approach is just so pragmatic. It's all about getting results, success magic, you could say, and it's completely detached from the kind of hierarchy and, the elaborate ceremonial stuff that was really common back then.
Right.
Osman Spare, he lived from 1886 to 1956, and he was definitely a bit of a heretic for his time. Very individual anarchistic in his thinking. You can see influences from people like Lao Tse, maybe some early Wicca, even Max Stirner in there.
So that really sets him apart from the more established, almost dogmatic, magical systems of the day, like Crowley's Thelema, for instance, which were still very much about structure and ceremony.
Oh, completely. Spare just cut right through all that. He argued pretty forcefully that magical symbols, if they're going to work, have to come from your own unconscious mind, not from some ancient book of symbols or divine names passed down through tradition.
I felt all that complexity was just keeping the intellect busy, right? Not actually doing much.
Pretty much. He famously called the sigil a monogram of thought.
A monogram of thought. I like that.
Yeah. And the whole point, the core purpose of making these symbols is practical success, getting something done in the real world. And he believed that success was tied directly to how well the sigil captures your unique individual makeup.
Okay, so that kind of sets our mission for this deep dive then. We need to break down the actual techniques, how you, listening right now, can actually construct these things, charge them up, activate them, and then, this is the really weird part, get them out of your head, obliterate them from conscious thought. All right, let's start at the beginning. The basic construction, the foundational technique, the word method. This is where it gets tangible. Turning a wish into a kind of graphic puzzle.
The word method, yeah. It's actually quite a simple sequence, but it's designed specifically to sort of scramble the conscious mind's grip on the desire itself. So, first step. You formulate a sentence. It needs to state your desire clearly, specifically, and crucially positively. No, I wish not to, or I would like to. Then you write that sentence out in all capital letters.
Okay, like Spare's famous example. This, my wish to obtain the strength of a tiger. All caps.
Exactly. Then, step 2. You go through that sentence and delete every letter that repeats. So in that tiger example, you'd cross out the second T, the second H, the second I, and so on. You end up with a much smaller set of unique letters. T, H, I, S, M, Y, W, O, B, A, N, E, R, G, F.
So the original language is already starting to dissolve, leaving just these sort of raw components.
Precisely. The conscious meaning is breaking down. And then the final step in construction. You take those leftover unique letters and you fuse them together. You combine them visually into a single, simple graphic glyph or symbol.
Does it have to look good? Like, do you need to be an artist?
Absolutely not. That's a key point. Artistic skill is totally irrelevant. The sigil needs to be simple enough that you can easily visualize it later, but its power doesn't come from aesthetics. It comes from the process of creating it, that reduction, and how potent it feels to you. It's entirely subjective.
Okay, let's double check that positive phrasing rule, because that seems important. Say I wanted to feel more confident for, I don't know, a presentation. I shouldn't write, I will not be nervous, right? I need to phrase it as something like, I possess complete calm and focus.
That's exactly it. Perfect example for listeners. Experience, both Spare's and subsequent practitioners, really shows that negative formulas using words like not or never tend to confuse the unconscious. You risk focusing its attention on the very thing you want to avoid. So if you don't want to get sick, you phrase it positively. This my wish to remain healthy.
Right, got it. So the construction feels quite logical, almost mechanical in a way. But the next step, the activation, that seems like pure psychological shock treatment. The whole point is to slam that weird little symbol deep into the unconscious and then like immediately slam the door shut on it consciously.
That's a good way to put it. This planting phase is what's called activation or charging, and it absolutely requires getting into what Spare called a magical trance or a Gnostic trance. It's an altered state of consciousness.
And the purpose of this trance is?
It's to soften up what he termed the psychic sensor.
The psychic sensor is that basically the everyday rational part of the brain, the filter that usually stops weird, non-logical stuff from getting into the deeper subconscious levels.
That's a great working definition, yeah. It's your critical, analytical mind standing guard. The Gnostic trance is achieved through any really intense state that causes a temporary shutdown of that critical faculty, that allows the sigil, the symbol, to slip past the guard, as it were.
Okay, so how do people actually induce that state reliably when they need to? What are the methods?
Well, Spare detailed a few, but two main ones stand out. The first, often cited as the easiest and maybe most effective for many, is using sexual climax, orgasm.
Right.
The idea is to focus your entire attention intensely on the visual shape of the sigil right at the moment of climax, that peak of euphoria or ecstasy. That intensity is usually enough to just overwhelm the conscious sensor, but critically, you must not think about the original sentence, the wish itself, only the visual symbol.
So you're leveraging that peak biological and emotional intensity. Okay, what about the other method, the one that sounds a bit more physically extreme?
That would be the death posture. There are variations, but version 1 aims for what Spare called a panic-stricken no-mind state. It involves restricting the senses, blocking your eyes, ears, mouth, and nose, and holding your breath until you're right at the absolute edge, just before fainting.
Wow.
Then, at that breaking point, you spasmodically open your eyes and stare, fixated at the sigil while gasping for air.
Okay, obviously we need to include the serious warnings that come with that in the source material. It's explicitly not for anyone with heart issues, high blood pressure, lung problems. That sounds genuinely dangerous if you're not careful.
Absolutely. Caution is paramount with that method.
But does that extreme physical duress, that near panic state, potentially work better for some people than the, let's say, ecstatic overload of the sexual method? Is the shock purely physical versus emotional?
It's less about better or worse, maybe, and more about different pathways to the same result. Both methods aim to cause that momentary blackout of critical thought. The sexual method uses intense pleasure and ecstasy to distract or overwhelm the sensor. The death posture uses, well, extreme physical stress and the accompanying fear response to overload it.
So both are trying to create that window, that temporary bypass.
Exactly. Which one provides a cleaner pathway past the individual's specific psychic sensor is really a matter of subjective experience and preference. Both aim for total focus, followed by a kind of cognitive exhaustion or blankness where the sigil can be implanted.
Okay, so regardless of how you manage to slam the sigil into the unconscious, the next step is absolutely mandatory.
Banish, yeah.
Why is forgetting so critical? Why not keep focusing on the desire?
Because the unconscious needs to be allowed to work on the instruction without conscious meddling. If you keep thinking about the sigil or worrying about the wish or constantly looking for signs of it manifesting, you're essentially interfering with the process. Conscious desire, conscious anxiety, conscious second-guessing, they all sabotage the operation. The unconscious has received the command, now it needs to be left alone to execute it.
Okay, so after that intense charging moment, what's the immediate action? How do you actually force yourself to forget?
Immediate jarring distraction is key. Spare suggested that the best method is often just immediate, roaring laughter, a sudden, total shift in emotional state. Or, just as effectively, abruptly shifting your focus to something utterly mundane and trivial. Like instantly switch on the TV and get absorbed in some trashy show, or start meticulously checking a shopping list, or even initiate some petty argument about something completely unrelated.
That's just a psychological whiplash. Going from that extreme internal state to sudden, banal external focus.
Exactly. That shock locks the sigil away, pushes it out of conscious reach. The core principle Spare hammered home was, the faster you forget the sigil, the more effective it is.
That sudden shift is a powerful psychological trick. Okay, but what if your desire feels like it lends itself better to sound than a visual symbol? Would Spare system account for that? That brings us towards acoustic symbols, maybe?
Yes, absolutely. That's covered by what's sometimes called the mantrical spell method. It's a variation. Instead of designing a graphic glyph, you take your sentence of desire and you transform it, usually by breaking it down and rearranging the sounds, into a quasi-phonetic mantra, a string of syllables that has no obvious meaning to your conscious mind.
Like, the example often used is something like Howie Emner Kusa derived from some sentence.
Something like that, yeah. A meaningless rhythmic phrase.
And how do you charge or activate a sound like that differently from a picture?
Often, these mantrical sigils are activated through monotonous, rhythmic repetition over a period of time, chanting it over and over until the conscious mind just sort of gets lulled into submission, allowing the mantra to sink in. Or, alternatively, you could derive a single potent word of power from the mantra and shout that spasmodically during a climax state, using the same kind of shock activation we discussed with the visual sigils.
Right, using that same overload principle.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go a bit deeper into Spare's really unique contribution here. The alphabet of desire. This sounds like it moves beyond just making one-off sigils for specific goals. It's more like building a reusable toolkit.
That's a great way to think about it. The alphabet of desire is often considered one of the core innovations of Spare system. It's incredibly useful as a kind of dynamic mirror of your own psyche. The concept involves creating a personalized set of 22 glyphs. Originally, Spare conceived of them relating to different aspects of sexuality, but they can really represent any fundamental concept or drive relevant to the individual.
And the way you create these alphabet glyphs is different too, isn't it? It's not the careful step-by-step word method we talked about earlier. It uses something called an association technique.
Correct. This is much less structured, much more intuitive. The magician doesn't logically design the symbol by deleting letters. Instead, they enter an active meditative state or some kind of heightened awareness and focus intensely on a key concept, maybe a word like Job or health or connection.
Okay.
And then while holding that focus, they use automatic writing or just spontaneous scribbling, allowing a glyph, a symbol for that concept, to emerge directly from the unconscious onto the paper. It's meant to be a purely spontaneous, unforced creation.
Wow, so you're basically asking your unconscious to just give you the symbol directly.
That's the idea.
What's the big advantage of doing this over time? Building up this whole personal alphabet, this sigil dictionary, as you called it.
The long-term benefit is huge. It becomes an unparalleled tool for self-analysis, for understanding your own deeper drives and patterns. By collecting and reviewing these spontaneously generated symbols over time, you get this incredible overview of your magical work, yes, but also your underlying psychological landscape.
How so?
Well, imagine you look back through your personal alphabet of desire or just the sigils you've been creating using this method, and you notice you keep generating symbols related to concepts like, say, lack or fear or control. That immediately flags up potential unconscious emotional imbalances or recurring themes in your life, often much faster and more clearly than, say, hours of conventional meditation or journaling might. It brings the subconscious patterns right to the surface.
Okay, so let's try to wrap our heads around this. We've looked at a system that's really focused on speed and subjective experience. A psycho-magical technology where, with practice, you could potentially design, charge, and banish a sigil in, what, less than 10 minutes?
Easily, yeah. 5 to 10 minutes is often cited once you're familiar with it.
And its power seems to rely entirely on crafting a symbol that is uniquely meaningful only to your unconscious, and then finding a way to briefly switch off your brain's usual critical filter to plant it deep down.
That's the core takeaway, I think. Spare's method is the epitome of subjective empiricism in magic. It works, proponents argue, because it's about communicating directly with the unique structure and language of your own unconscious mind, using symbols you have personally encoded and charged. It bypasses universal systems.
Which puts it in stark, direct contrast to the older, dogmatic, magical traditions that came before and alongside Spare. Those traditions insisted on highly structured, often mathematically derived, universal symbols, things rooted in cosmic order, not individual psychology.
Absolutely. Thinkers in those traditions, maybe exemplified by someone like the famous 16th century occultist Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa von Nettesheim, really rejected that kind of individual spontaneity. Their approach demanded mathematically rigorous methods, often based on what are called planetary chemias.
Planetary chemias, magic number squares.
Exactly. Magic number squares associated with the different planets, Mars, Jupiter, Venus, and so on. Each planet has its own specific numerical grid.
Okay, so walk us through that briefly, just so we can really feel the difference in approach. How did that mathematical process work?
Well, in a traditional system like Agrippa's, you'd take a name, perhaps a divine name, an angel's name, or even your own name or a word representing your desire, and you'd convert it into a series of numbers. This was often done using Kabbalistic techniques like gematria or specific ciphers like Ak-Baker, which assigns a numerical value to each letter of the Hebrew or sometimes Latin alphabet.
So you get a number sequence from your word. Then what?
Then you take that sequence of numbers and you literally trace it out, like connect the dots, onto the magic number square, the chamia, corresponding to the planet whose influence you want to invoke for your goal. So if you wanted help with aggressive action or overcoming obstacles, you'd trace your number sequence onto the magic square of Mars. For financial matters or legal success, you'd use the square of Jupiter.
Ah, I see.
The resulting shape, the line you've traced on that specific planetary grid, is the sigil. It's a symbol believed to be universally aligned with that specific celestial force, rooted in divine mathematics and cosmic structure, completely independent of your personal subconscious whims.
That makes the contrast crystal clear. On one hand, Spare's ultra-personal, fast, psychologically driven monogram of thought. On the other, Agrippa's mathematically precise, universally resonant symbol derived from planetary number grids and ancient correspondences.
Two fundamentally different philosophies of how magic works and where its power comes from.
Which leaves us with a really interesting question for you, the listener, to mull over. If your goal is simply rapid, effective success in the world, should you prioritize the modern, quick, highly individual approach pioneered by Osman Spare, relying purely on your own psychomagical wiring? Or is there more potency in the ancient, mathematically rigorous methods rooted in planetary spheres, traditional correspondences, and maybe even divine names, like those meticulously laid out in the tables of Agrippa? Personal shortcut versus cosmic alignment. That's something to think about until next time on the Deep Dive.